Hey, I am Mustafa Sharif. Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I'm looking forward. This episode going to be super interesting. We're gonna talk about how can we design better cities with help of artificial intelligence. I have the pleasure to welcome the CEO and the co-founder of Spacemakers, Howard Haukeland. Welcome to Urbanistica podcast.
Thank you, Mustafa. It's a pleasure being invited.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you. How about yourself?
I am fine. So now I guess you're home in Oslo?
Yes, that's right. Working from home.
Yeah. And
We yeah. No, we have offices across multiple locations in the world, so it's we're kind of used to working remote. So it's I guess it's even more practical for us to work kind of fully remote and not thinking of us being in one office, but more thinking about all the employees being spread across. So yeah, we're definitely working from home and it's working well.
yes, that's great to hear. And how is the weather now in Oslo?
Oh, it has been good, but it's raining right now. It's a storm coming in. Yeah,
But summer is coming, hopefully.
hopefully, yes.
So, Howard, you are our storyteller. How would you like to introduce yourself? And please tell us, what are you passionate about?
Yes, I can. I'm educated and worked as an architect before started Spacemaker together with two others. And today I'm the CEO, so I'm working very broadly across our company about what we do. But I'm still very much out with our customers and users, but also working strategically with improving the product and building new parts of the product to meet the needs of our customers. So that's really what I'm passionate about, building stuff. I've been that since I was a kid, and this is kind of the ultimate challenge of building something really complex that can bring a lot of value and be important. So that's what excites me.
Yes, and you're an architect, and usually we don't see this relationship between like programming, artificial intelligence, and architects. Architects like more to do it by hand, sketch, and so on. So, what made you to take this step and move toward more artificial intelligence?
Yes. So that's an interesting question, and I know that a lot of or a growing number of architects and people in the industry today are taking on courses of learning Python and doing some coding and parametric design, and there's a lot of new opportunities that's kind of growing. But I was never interested in that, so I had never written a line of code when we started discussing the problem. So Spacemaker was born from a frustration more than kind of an idea of how it could be solved. So um, I was working as an architect today back then in 2015, and I was just really frustrated about the fact that I couldn't deliver the value our customers wanted and needed, and that kind of the projects deserved. So I was frustrated about how the process was done and the lack of tools that could kind of really help us achieve a better project and a better process. I believe that if we change the process, it could really benefit the projects. And to change the process, we needed to build the tools. So it was more coming in that sequence. And I introduced this problem to a close friend of mine who worked as a management consultant, so a really business savvy guy who I used to discuss ideas with. Most of them really really bad. But this, but this one really triggered him, and he saw, this was a huge value potential in a big market, and we could potentially create better projects, which kind of triggered us. So he introduced a friend he had that was really good at building products. He had been building products for a decade and was very early on kind of studying machine learning and kind of going into advanced technologies, embracing them. And he's also very business savvy. So I think people who are good at that today, they get exposed to ideas every day from friends who have this amazing idea. And what triggered him was that he saw kind of one of the last living dinosaurs. That this was an industry that was
Yeah.
actually untouched by digital disruption and tools and rethinking business models and rethinking how we did things. And he just saw a blue ocean of opportunity for a guy like him, and he was just triggered by by the opportunity, and that we all share this very ambitious approach to it, and saying, okay, we can really change this industry on a global scale, and let's go do it, and let's go build something really ambitious and rethink the entire process of developing urban sites. So that's what we started the idea,
Yeah,
the
that's a
company.
that's a great story. That I thought you were all the three, like the founders, were all architects or urban planners. That's very interesting.
No, I was the only one with background from the industry, and I think that's actually been that's something I would have replicated if I would do it again. Is to kind of put together a complementary founders team that has both kind of the business dimension and building a company, and then the kind of industry expertise, and then the technology expertise, because then you don't step on each other's toes that much, and you kind of become complementary.
Yeah.
And we were all kind of visionary and creative and wanted to build and kind of expansive in our mindset. So that worked well together. Sorry, I
Yeah.
dropped you there. Yeah.
So, and as you mentioned before, like we are a kind of back in time. We are the dinosaurs, and they are already like in the future. So was it hard in the beginning to discuss how you want to do it, and was it easy to communicate like architecture, urban planning with people that don't really work with it?
Yeah. So you mean with customers and users, and yeah. Yes, I think I mean, what we did very early on was we started interacting with real potential users. So real estate developers, architects, people who could kind of inform us, people we could discuss with. And another way of doing it would have been to kind of hire a bunch of industry experts in the team, but we believed from day one that we could get that information from what we needed to build by interacting with customers from day one. So we, even before we had code, at the time we just had a PowerPoint slide, we started discussing the idea, like, what if we did something like this? Would that create value, and what would happen? And then we got them enthused because they wanted to be a part of that, and they joined us as research partners in the beginning, and then pilot customers, and then kind of gradually ramping up their engagement so they could kind of follow us and see the speed that we were able to build stuff. And I think that was really exciting for them in the beginning as well. Rather than coming with the solution and saying, hey, you should rethink how to do things, we have come up with a solution. But today, of course, it's more like that, because we have a product and we have multiple users using it. But the world has really changed in those 5 years as well. So kind of the word prop tech wasn't invented when we started discussing this, and now it's all over the place, and contech and everything. But technology or real estate companies also has a digital agenda, or many of them at least has, and they have started embracing it. So they're more curious and they want to learn, and they've also kind of put people in place to find a way that they can start testing and the way they can kind of implement it, etc. So it's easier now, but yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine in the beginning. And how was it for you? Was it easy for you to communicate your ideas with your co-founders, with the programmers? In the beginning, you as an architect.
Yeah. Well, when you don't know what to build, you just know what the problem is. It's really it has to become this iteration where you just kind of discuss openly ideas and test something, and you throw it away, and that phase is really exciting. I think we all really embrace that phase and like that phase, and we like throwing away things, and we kind of wanted to build a culture where that was possible. And another thing that actually my co-founder, the CTO Carl, taught me early on is that I think there's a phrase saying, without data, you're just another person with an opinion, which is really is maybe misunderstood to be that you need a lot of usage data that you obviously don't have in the beginning. But what software engineers and people from the tech industry like to think is that you need a lot of different opinions to kind of inform you in order to know what to build. So even though I had industry expertise and I had these strong ideas of how to do things, I early on learned that I needed to kind of battle those ideas with input they got from customers and others, and they could be contradictory. And they very early on started saying, we don't see that as a good idea. We should rather do that. And I think as a founder, if you don't embrace that and start kind of fighting it, it becomes really hard. You need to build a culture where you embrace that it's the people who sit closest to the customers who also, you know, are able to see solutions that you're not able to see yourself, and they maybe see it from a technical perspective or from a product perspective or UX perspective or a business perspective, and that's also important, maybe even more important. So
Yeah, so you should be open-minded and ready to reshape your ideas, right?
yes, completely, and throw away ideas as well, right?
Yeah.
And there's another quote. I'm not really a quote guy, but you probably see me as one now. But there's another quote saying that you should fall in love with your problem and not your idea, and I really like that because it's the problem the problem has been the same all the way. The problem doesn't change. What changes is your nuances in the way you see the problem, and you maybe get new information that you see the problem in a different way, that other solutions might create value, but the problem is still constant. But your solution needs to change all the time. You can't fall in love with your solution.
Yeah, very interesting. So how big is the team now, and what are the different experts you have? Architects and so on?
Yeah, so the team is the team passed 100 this summer, so I think we're almost 110 now. We started hiring in the beginning of 2017, so that's in 3 years. So it's been a rapid growth, and the team is it's a combination of the classical disciplines that you find in every software company, like software engineers and UX designers and product managers and kind of the normal disciplines. But we also have a lot of data scientists is what we call them, but it's typically mathematicians or people with background from physics or advanced disciplines where they really deep dive on solving the hard problems. And then there is about 15% of the team is coming from the industry. So either working with developing the product or helping our customers use the product and understand how to use it and get the most out of it. And there's, of course, a commercial team and kind of the more standard team that you have. So, but I think almost 80% of the team is product and tech people. So
Wow.
it's a really large product team.
Yeah, and this is completely different from what we see in the industry. Like if we talk about urban designers, architecture firms, completely different structure and culture, me.
Yes, absolutely. It's pretty weird to be kind of bigger than many of the architecture firms that I used to work for in
Can
just a
imagine.
couple. Yeah.
So how does it work? Can you explain? Can you break it down to us? What is it about?
Absolutely. So the kind of down to earth way of explaining it is that it's a software. It's a software. It's a software platform for the teams who work with designing or developing urban projects today. So typically residential projects or mixed use projects. And but I would say a more maybe bold way of saying it, but also a more precise way of saying it is that we're really rethinking how to do early phase development of residential and kind of urban projects, because it's also very much about the approach. The tool that we have today is built up of, or the way the world works today is that you have a big group of experts around the project table, and they have all sorts of expertise that they bring to the table. And that's architects or urban planners and the real estate developer, of course, and the municipality. And then you have a big range of disciplines like civil engineers in stormwater or energy or daylight or traffic or noise or and all these disciplines. And then you have the contractor, etc. So all of those, they sit together. No, they don't sit together today, but they have each of their own expert tools that they sit and work in. That's kind of a local tool that they work with. And what we have done is basically to rebuild all of those tools, or many of those, but we're about to build all of those tools into the same platform. And the reason why we've done that is because today, when you're developing a urban site, the complexity is really high. There are so many things that you need to think about and consider. And the process lasts for years. And then you have multiple stakeholders. And then it becomes this political game, a game of trade-offs where it's about trying to understand the nuances of every problem and how you can adapt to it. and the project always becomes this compromises, a set of compromises of how you meet all of these needs. And then there's these requirements from the regulatory requirements, and then you have the technical dimensions of the building systems, and then you have the financial elements of it, and then you have the softer qualities that most people talk about and care about, but they spend all their time doing calculations. So there's so much things that you need to take into account to create a successful project. And that's also the problem that this started from, right? I felt that the architect tend to sit with the model, right? They are the one who has the physical model. And then kind of all of the other disciplines become voices into that and shaping it. And then you investigate kind of how you need to handle the traffic noise, but it all turns into a shape. It all turns into the way you physically organize the site, right? So when you are to come up with a proposal that kind of handles all of this complexity, you not only need to make people work together and sit in the same model, because they're not doing that today, right? They're sitting with their own tool and coming with a paper. So that's one dimension of it, that once you have the same kind of analysis and the same expert tools in the same software, then you can actually discuss the trade-offs and see, what if I change this and rotate the buildings here? How does that affect the traffic noise? Does it open up for more daylight? Yes, it does, but it also opens up for more noise. Okay, so this seems to be a good compromise. So then you can have the experts collaborate. But the other dimension of it is that once you have everything in the same tool, you can also start building decision support for those people. That's really when the powerful new technologies that AI and cloud computing and can really bring to life, is that then you can actually give those people advice and assist them and come up with proposals and say, okay, if you're trying to optimize for this, but you want to fix the heights, here's 5 different proposals where this is the best on this, and this is the worst on this, and this is the best. And then you can actually come up with those ideas for them. But the humans need to be in there and ask those questions. But once you make that possible, you really completely rethink how the process is done. So one of our early customers, they rigged their entire project team and worked in the model, and then 6 months down the road, all of a sudden they felt that they had come up with a solution that they normally would have spent 18 months doing. So they were at the place where they would normally be after 18 months, because normally what you don't do when people sit in expert tools is that you don't bring in an expert and that needs to build a model in their own tool, like a daylight expert or noise expert, and you don't bring that person into the project before you think you know what you want to build, but you need the information to come up with what you want to build, right? So this is a paradox, and the expert really wants to come in earlier, because then they can have an impact on the project. That's when it's easy to change the design, and that's when the mistakes are done, and that's also what's best for the project, right? But since it's so time consuming and costly today, you typically wait with it. And many of our customers call it oh shit moments, when they 6 months down the road find out that they did an assumption that the traffic wasn't that loud on that road, so we don't need to do that report now. And then all of a sudden they see that, whoa, it was louder than we thought, so we need to rethink everything we did the last 6 months.
Yeah. Okay, this was a mind-blowing explanation of how everything works. And I found it really useful, really great. So basically you bring all the expert to one system. So we don't need any more me as an urban planner, I don't need to check, or architect, I don't need to check the different report from the ecological analysis, from like water management and so on. So everything is just in one place.
Yes,
But
exactly.
how do you put in the different values so we get this model or product?
You mean what we measure? Or
Yeah,
no?
exactly, the noise pollution and so on. How do you put in this?
Okay. That might be 2 different questions, but one is kind of what you put in. And I understand why you asked that, because everybody asks us that. What do I need to put into the model?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the other one is kind of what do I get out? But if you start with what you put in, The system allows you to very quickly come up with a digital model of your site and the surroundings. So the system kind of fetches the data you need. So that means we've built up that you can simply just write the address of your site and tell kind of the software that this is my site, and then you kind of just picks site boundaries and the traffic situation and the weather data and all these things that you need to do the analysis. In some cases, you maybe have a model yourself, or you have something you want to input, so then you can do that as well. So it's kind of compatible with other software, like BIM tools and etc. But on the output side, there's close to 100 analysis in the software today. So we're really geeks when it comes to measuring things. And many of them are environmental analysis, like wind analysis or daylight or noise, like traffic noise.
Rainwater.
Yeah, and then stormwater analysis. These kind of environmental analysis. Many of those are geometrical, so more kind of things you need for the numbers, kind of the floor area or the kind of the regulatory requirements of heights, etc. So all of the numbers that we call them geometric numbers. And some are kind of more market related, so the apartment sizes and the apartment distribution. And some of them are more qualitative, like what you can see from each apartment and how far you can see, and kind of more softer analysis that we've built ourselves, that there's no standard on those. And then there's a bunch of other cool stuff.
Yeah. So basically, in the end of running this software, I got different proposal, and I can make the decision which one is the best one for me.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is not a software that just fixes the process. So you can't just input everything, then it comes out this silver bullet that just fixes everything, because that's not the way the process works today. First of all, the process is a political process, both actually political, but also you need to interact with many different stakeholders, and then you find new information, then you iterate on it, etc. So the process needs to take time. And the other dimension of it is that what's really hard today, we call it a waterfall process today, where since there are so many things you need to do, the way it's handled today in real estate development and in the early phase is that you start with one thing that you think is really important, and then you fix that. So maybe the traffic noise situation or the heights or something you feel is really important, and then you start with the next topic and the next topic. But what you really need to do is you need to be able to work with all of these things in an iterative way. So we've really made it possible to take everything into account from your first proposal. And what happens then is that you're able to test many, many more solutions. So when I worked as an architect, even though I was a geek when it comes to kind of testing and trying to kind of chase and maximize the value, etc., I wasn't able to deep dive on more than maybe 5 proposals, right? And then once you made the decision and said, this is what we're going to try to get through and build, then you felt that you had left so many options on the table, right? And what we see now is that you can test so many more solutions, not only because the computer uses thousands of computers and or the software, so that you're able to explore and generate thousands of. That's not only the way this works. It's also because you as a person are able to have all of these analysis and information just by a click of a button, right? So all of a sudden you become aware of many things that you normally don't explore before 6 months down the road. So it kind of becomes a process where you just test much more.
Yeah. So it's not 100% based on artificial intelligence. A human being should be part of this game.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We call it an kind of assistive tool. So it's really assisting the humans and empowering them and giving them superpowers. And not only the architect, but kind of all the disciplines around the table. So it's not replacing tasks, but it's making it possible to do the tasks in a new way. So it's actually making it possible to explore many more options and get the information you need early on. but also guide you into making better decisions faster.
Yes, exactly. But nowadays, like people either like good friends with artificial intelligence or like against because
Yeah.
they are afraid and so on. So when it comes to planning a site and designing it, can we still have these social values? Because what we see this the programming more like the hardware, you know, the solid things. But when it comes to the life in between buildings, is it is it able to understand this, or how do we create it?
I mean, I think if we zoom out a little bit, the problem you're addressing is really important, because when we're building denser than before and faster than before, and we have more requirements and more stakeholders than before, and we need to build more sustainable than before, then it becomes really hard to spend enough time to take care of those soft qualities and those qualities that are harder to measure, and those qualities that you need human thinking into, and you need human experiences, and it's more soft, right? And I think the creative people involved in planning urban sites, they have they need to spend much more time on being creative and work with this than ever before. It's needed, because we're planning sites faster, and everything needs to happen faster and denser and everything. And then we need to spend more time doing calculations and testing, and empowering those people to be more creative is actually taking away those things that they shouldn't spend their time on, and that they don't want to spend their time on, that computers are much better at spending at doing. So we see that people in one project that a bunch of architects were working in this competition, and the winner of that competition, we saw that they really embraced the numbers, they really embraced the potential in the software and used it to they trusted the numbers, and they embraced it. So they didn't spend time on that part. And what they could do then is that they could come much further in the limited time and budget they had. So they were able to work with the stormwater handling and the nuances of how the transition from a public space to a private space happened, and those small details that were able to make this project really convincing, and that were able to make these small dense areas really good for people to stay in. And they were not a wind corridor, and they were not full of shade, and the numbers were really good. The real estate developer was really happy. It was, of course, the most profitable project as well, because they trusted what the computational power had allowed them to come up with. So
Yeah, so it's saving time, money, and also preparing a good base for a good site.
yeah, and that's also important. There's sites are becoming really expensive in urban sites, and there's a competition between real estate developers, and they're taking big bets, and they need the numbers to work. So what we see is that when the software is able to come up with proposals and help the users come up with proposals and projects that are more profitable, and they're better at the soft qualities because the creative people have been able to work more with that, then it actually becomes this win-win situation where the best projects also are the ones that are realized. So
Yeah.
we have seen proposals where the numbers for the real estate developers are quite surprising. They find like 10 or 15% more sellable space than kind of the benchmark they're chasing for. And then there's other projects where in one project they work to optimize the number of apartments that could see the ocean, and they knew that for every apartment that could see the ocean, they could get $50,000 more for that apartment. So in sum, it was a large project. So in sum, they increased the estimated sales value of 10 million US dollars overall for the project, and it became a better project because more people could actually get this beautiful sea view.
Yeah,
And it,
of course.
yeah,
That's fantastic. Do you believe you're in continually development of this tool, right?
yes,
What is going to be the next step of it?
yes. So today, the software is mainly being used for urban projects where residential is the largest part of the project. And it's in the Nordic countries, so Norway, Sweden, Finland, about to enter Denmark, but it's also France, which was kind of the first non-Nordic country we entered. So we have an office in Paris, and some large players in Paris has started embracing this, like Bouygues Immobilier, the largest developer in Europe. So we're on our way out there. We also have an office in US, in Boston. So I guess my point is that we're about to scale this software, of course, globally into the big urban regions where urban planning is happening. But we're also building it for more of the verticals. So it means that we can support more of the mixed use urban projects where there are other needs, like more of the needs, basically, for how you plan office buildings or hospitals or schools, or kind of more of the needs that you have in urban projects that are somewhat different in a kind of other vertical. So kind of that's the second dimension. The third dimension is that we have kind of just started building this as a collaborative software platform. We have succeeded in bringing in the developer and the architect, and we're about to bring in more and more of the civil engineer, kind of the expert disciplines there, so that actually the people involved. But there's a big potential in bringing in a bunch of more of them, so that you truly build out the capabilities that empowers this collaboration tool and becomes kind of the platform where you develop your project.
Yeah, and I guess you're going to take it to a more advanced level. So does it mean that in the future, architects, urban planner will have less things to do because this software is taking over?
No, I don't think so. I think, or I'm sure they won't. I mean, the challenges and the needs for architects and their services and experts are just growing. We're building more than ever before and more complex than ever before, and we're densifying our urban areas at a speed that we've never done before. So the need for people to use their expertise into this process is bigger than ever. But there's another dimension to it that we didn't talk about before, on kind of where we're scaling this. I thought that's what you were asking, was kind of more how long down the road in the process can this technology be applied to, and kind of more downstream of the project. And we have mainly focused on the early phase for now. So the phase that starts with buying the site, and then all the way to kind of the regulatory zoning process, and when you're starting to detail plan what you're going to build. And there is a big potential there as well. What we see, and we there's a lot of things that we can do and will do to get further downstream, but we believe that also there is a lot of investments into technology that has taken place downstream in the kind of construction phase. I think more than 80% of technology investments has happened here. But what's interesting is that in the early phases, where more than 50% of the value is being created, but only 20% of the technology investments has happened there. So I think that's really where you can have an impact on the projects. That's where you do the big mistakes, but that's also where you can kind of create the big differences and create the best solutions.
Exactly.
So we believe in helping people in that early phase. That's kind of our goal, because that's where we see the biggest value right now.
And are you also thinking to how to link your software with the other stage, like when it comes to design, construction, and so on, like more of the details?
Yeah, absolutely. The software today can kind of is compatible with other software. So you can export models from SpaceMaker into like Revit or other BIM tools, and you can import from Rhino or other tools as well. So we see that this tool needs to be part of an ecosystem of tools that our users use. But since this is the first phase, we don't need to kind of adapt to that you're starting in another project. So we see that our customers, they start in SpaceMaker, and then they continue working in other tools at some point.
Yeah, but do you see, are people open to bring in spacemakers to project? What do you see, like when you tell them it's done by artificial intelligence and so on? Are they willing to be part of this game?
Yes, I think they are. There is a big enthusiasm and belief in new technologies where that is completely different than what we saw just 4 or 5 years ago, that people are embracing it in a strategic level at board levels and management levels in companies, but also on kind of user level, that they want to learn new tools. And especially now in COVID-19, where people have had a lot of time on their hands, we've never seen as much usage in the software that we've seen in COVID, because people have time to learn new tools, and it's a cloud-based tool, so they can just work at it from anywhere, and they can keep collaborating, so they don't need to kind of sit in a meeting room. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And what is the challenge that you're facing?
The challenge.
Yeah.
When it comes to adoption, well, there is definitely people who, I mean, changing the way you work or learning new tools there's always resistance there. So what we see is that the companies who really succeed with that is the ones who have a digital agenda, who strongly believes that new technologies should not be part of the IT budget together with Word and Excel, but it should be part of the project budgets. Embracing technology, adopting it, learning it, implementing it. It's part of the project development and part of the cost of developing the project. And new advanced technologies are maybe big investments, but they also have a very exciting ROI opportunity that you need to believe in, right? And what we see is that when people truly invest in this and really go all in, that's also when they get the most value out of it. And one of our customers who were very early, the largest developer in Norway called Obos, they at some point, I think it was 18 months after they did the first kind of pilot in one project, they had used this across so many projects and identified the challenges of implementing this, that you need to tell the organization that we're now doing this. This is something we're standardizing across all projects, because that's when they get the big benefits from it. Then that's when you kind of change your mind. That's also when they got the massive results from it, right? That's when they saw that, wow, this is really improving our processes across the line. And that's when technology can be good investments.
So it's about the mindset and taking it to and implementing all the system, not just in a small project or part of it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So Howard, it was very inspiring to talk about this topic, and thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. It was very exciting to discuss it with you as well.
My pleasure. So now I have a software that takes you back in time.
Okay,
and
great.
It's a time machine basically, and you're allowed to change one thing from the architectural and urban planning point of view. What are you going to change?
Okay, that's an interesting question. I guess I'm a bit of an optimist. I'm not a backward thinker. I'm always a forward thinker. So I like to think that people do decisions based on what they know then. So once you start introducing time machines, you're kind of basing it on wrong information, because you're basing it on information you didn't have. But what's really cool to still simulate is that I think the hardest thing to change is culture, kind of human culture. So and one of the things that, for example, the introduction of a private cars and introducing kind of designing urban sites in kind of based on principles of urban sprawl and using cars as a part of that. What that did is it kind of completely changed the way we live and the way we use our cities. And we didn't know by then that would kind of warm up our planet and become this fatal threat to our planet, right? But if we'd known, we'd probably done something differently. And I would, of course, loved to go back in time and kind of introduce more of those insights that we didn't know that could potentially help us change it. But as I said, I also believe in humans being really adaptable, and that we're able, when we have met fatal threats through thousands of years and being able to adapt to it. So I actually believe that we're able to also change this once we feel the fear enough. I mean, look at what COVID-19 did. It kind of made every species on the planet behave in the same way because we felt threatened, right, on our lives. And when people start feeling threatened about the environmental change, they will probably also act. And the question is, of course, if it's too late. But I think if we can,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And what will you add to cities if you're allowed to add one thing?
I think I'm not sure I would add one thing, but if I could make a rule, if I could like add a rule to every people who design cities, I think one of the biggest threats that we see when from a project perspective and the potential of creating good projects is that people tend to be satisfied with good enough. And 4 out of 5 people are satisficers, so they're not maximizers. Once they come to a solution that they think is good enough, and especially on complex problems, they feel like, okay, this is good, let's decide on this. But only 20% of us keeps chasing for something better. And when in urban planning, with the complexity and all the needs for actually creating good projects, the projects and the cities and the people who live in these buildings and use these areas, they deserve that all people are maximizers. So if it was one rule that I would implement in urban teams, it's to not fix the concept too early, to keep iterating and don't get in love with your concept, but see it as the best proposal you have based on the information you have now. But then you will learn something new the day after. Then you should keep rethinking your entire concept. It's not going backwards. It's learning something new and then keep iterating. So
that's amazing, and it takes me back to your to the quote you mentioned in the beginning, that fall in love with the problem, not with your concept or solution.
Yes, exactly. And I think architects and urban planning teams, also engineers and developers, should live by that rule when it comes to planning urban sites as well.
Yeah. Well, again, it was very inspiring to talk to you. So how would you like to summarize our conversation and your reflections in 3 takeaway messages to all the listeners?
So the first would be the one we just mentioned. So explore longer. Don't fix the design too early. Just keep iterating. There's no excuse for not taking environmental aspects into consideration. And once you learn something new, it's not going backwards. It's going forward. The other is collaborate. So urban planning and real estate development is a political process. So you should be a smart politician, diplomatic but strategic and pragmatic, and kind of embrace new knowledge and chase for good and ideal compromises, because it is a game of trade-offs. So don't get personal, but try to see this as a politics game where you collaborate. And the third one is, I guess, has to do with technologies and implementing those, and that topic we discussed there. I think powerful new technologies are assisting humans in making better decisions. And we always say that when people ask, we don't think that AI will ever replace architects or experts, but the ones who embrace AI and new technologies will definitely replace the ones who don't. So
yeah, exactly.
And have more fun.
Of course, yes, of course. So 3 hashtags also for the episode.
I'm really bad at hashtags. I'm really bad at it. I don't even know where to start. Yeah. No, can I pass on that?
Yeah. You can do that. At least one, maybe one hashtag.
Yeah, I don't know.
We pass.
Yeah, maybe design exploration then.
Could be, yes.
I think that's a good one. Yeah.
And what is going to be the next step for you, Howard?
So for Spacemaker?
Yeah, both like personally and also career-wise.
Yeah. So the next step I mean, we raised a large Series A round of $25 million last summer. So we're really expanding, and we've just started on a kind of global journey of expanding this internationally. And as I said, we just went from Europe, Nordics to Europe countries, and next we'll be also introducing it in the US and some other big markets. So I think that's kind of next up for us, is to expand to new markets. But yeah.
Great. And I wish you all the good luck.
Thank you so much.
And,
Likewise.
and what is the next step for you as a person?
Well, I think I'm being challenged with things I had never been exposed to every single day. So the next step is probably the challenge I'll meet tomorrow. I don't know what it is,
Yeah.
but I feel like I'm doing things I'd never done before every single day, and it's really exciting. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Enjoy life.
thank you. You too.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much again, Howard. And thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. Please don't forget to follow on Instagram and subscribe the YouTube channel. If you have any great story that makes our city smarter, please contact me. I am Mustafa Sharif. Keep up the good work. Keep loving cities.